Urban Renewal Commission Retreat meeting of August 9, 2022. Have a roll call?
Yes, Commissioner Frank O'Donnell is excused today. Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Sean Cross.
Here.
Commissioner Adam Marl.
Here.
And Vice Chair Doug Neely.
Here. Go back to my original page here on the agenda, but a staff report?
Turn it over to Patrick.
For the item this evening, we'll introduce James Graham, Economic Development Manager, and Finance Director Matt Zook are going to take the lead tonight.
Good evening, Commissioners, and welcome to your retreat. Before we get into the thick of things, I wanted to provide you with updates on two items that you had asked for on previous meetings. An update on 922 Main Street and an update on the city-owned property that's north of McDonald's, located on McLaughlin Boulevard. In regard to the property located on 922 Main Street, in my discussions with the developer, they are still working on the project, of course, but like many other projects, they run into increasing costs due to inflation, and also increasing situation, a difficult situation in regard to the supply chain. So those are the two challenges they're faced with, but they're still working, moving forward. If at some point they very well may come before this group to give you a further update as to where they are. Now, in regard to the property north of, the properties north of...
Could you be a little more specific? What are the supply chain type issues that are plaguing this project?
Supply chain materials, those type of materials, that's all I got out of it.
Materials like?
Materials for
Construction?
Construction, steel, wood,
Okay.
that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Now, in regard to the other property, Carrie Richter, our attorney, did some research on behalf of the commission to research these properties. And what we found is that the county, when the county received that property from the previous owner, there was a requirement on the property that there should be a sewer treatment facility on that property. And then in 1990, that expired. And then the county turned that property over to the city, and the city and the county had required that the city would put a park there. That has expired. So those two stipulations in the deed have expired. The only other stipulation that remains is that when the property was sold initially, the Highway Commission, and I think it was called the Highway Commission at the time, was required to maintain the embankment around the property. And we don't know exactly how deep that is, that step or that embankment around the property is. It very well may be 5 or 10 feet. We don't know. More research is being done to determine that embankment. So, embankment, I should say, embankment. So that's what we're dealing with.
I mean, because, well, the property slopes
Yeah.
down. There is an embankment there, a fairly substantial one.
So that's the update on those two properties. Now, if there are no other questions, we can go forward with the
You
issue.
have a question,
Go ahead.
Commissioner?
I do have a question, not on those two topics. I see, and we know that our city manager wasn't going to be here this evening. We don't have our attorney here this evening, correct?
Correct.
Yes. Did she leave?
Because I thought I saw her here
I think she's
earlier.
still right there.
Okay. I'm assuming this is, as part of the retreat, as still a dialogue session and that we aren't planning on making any decisions in any way.
Or not?
I'm asking that because as as of today, became aware of the lawsuit, which I don't think any of us have been given any input on, but a lawsuit has been filed against Urban Renewal, as we assumed would come. That's going to throw a wrench into pretty much everything we do going forward. I assume at some point we'll have a review of that. I haven't read it all to know that, but clearly it's going to have an effect on where we move forward on any topic in the next year or two. And so hopefully we can schedule some time to get a briefing on that. I just don't know how that affects this process today. Hopefully it does not, but clearly it would be unwise for us to make any decisions in urban renewal in the near future.
Mr. Smith, this is a work session and a retreat.
I get
so,
that. I'm just
yeah.
bringing it up.
No decisions will be made this evening. I think we were pretty clear on
Okay.
that. So Mr. Smith brought up that we received, I assume it's more than a notice of intent to sue. It's been filed of some sort. Okay. Yeah, we will need to have an opportunity to be briefed on that.
Oh, certainly, we just received it this afternoon.
That's what I understand.
We will come back to you on that.
Mr. Chair, is there any way that we could get maybe just a bullet point sheet from your department on what you just talked about with the county property? I mean, I was an employee of the city at the time that McDonald's was placed there, and I just have a very vague recollection that there were requirements and things, but that everything had expired because that's the only reason we would have been able to put that McDonald's there, even though I will say this for the record, the staff advised the commission at the time not to split the lot like that, to put the McDonald's there. But needless to say, the commission at the time made that decision, and here we are today. So it would be helpful, I think, just for the commission, both commissions, to have just, you said 1990 requirement of the sewer treatment plant, then they built the Tri-Cities where they built it, then there was a requirement that we use it as a park, and you didn't give any specific date when that expired, and then kind of where we are today. That would just be helpful, like maybe just an email to us to further solidify that.
Sure, I can do that if it's okay with the rest of the commission. If it's okay with the rest of the commission, then we'd be glad to do that.
Yeah, I would say it probably needs to go to both commissions. But thank you for that. Appreciate it.
So moving on, in your packet, although we provided you a very rough draft of the urban renewal amendment number 11, that is, of course, not the focal point for today. We just wanted you to see it as we are working on it, and it does still need some tweaking. Now, we have some major we have some major issues to discuss today with regard to several items. One, it's important to discuss creating a list of projects that you want to do, sort of narrowing that in, focusing on that, and then prioritize those projects on that list, and then determine how much you'd like to spend on those properties. Now, to help in all of this, Matt Zook is here to give you some information, to provide some financial input on the urban renewal financial structure and the projects that are associated so far with this effort.
Commission. I'm going to review my staff report briefly, and then we'll turn it over to you for discussion. And I think what I'm prepared to do tonight is track a discussion in the form of priorities and dollars, and if whatever decisions you decide to make or whatever recommendations you decide to make, we can do that and move forward. So essentially what I wanted to do tonight, and having listened to the last meeting back in May, these concepts may very well be falling on preaching to the choir, essentially, but I was asked to essentially recap kind of the capacity that the Urban Renewal Commission has for spending, and also kind of what that financial landscape would look like. So this evening, I'm going to just go over the basic financial variables, which include, as Mr. Graham just described, with the project selected, the timing, and the allocation of urban renewal dollars. So you recall that last time we met, we came up with 3 different categories. There was the public-private partnerships as one category, publicly owned projects, and then infrastructure projects. And from there, looking at the 2007 plan project list, those individual projects were categorized into those 3 buckets. So there were also some projects that were discussed as to whether or not they were still relevant, and also some projects that were proposed to be added. So nothing on this list is final, as Commissioner Smith indicated. Tonight's not necessarily a decision-making time, but this is all on the table. So in my staff report, I've listed those projects in the categories that we described. And I won't read them in detail here, but really there are several variables that go into the selection and the categorization of these projects.
Page 4, page 3, or
I'm on page 2.
2? Okay.
I'm a slow reader. Basically, there are three variables. Timing is probably one of the most important. In recalling our last meeting, I think Chair O'Donnell articulated it well. Essentially, the sooner the investment is done, and the larger the investment, the larger the potential return. And so there are really, you break this down essentially into 2 phases. Currently, the Urban Renewal District brings in roughly $3 million a year in tax increment revenue. And so that would allow the Urban Renewal Agency to borrow, the borrowing capacity of that is $35 to $40 million. And if you were to carry that $35 to $40 million over the full term of 20 years at 5%, the Urban Renewal could pay that back. That first chunk of money, say 35 to 40 million, is really important in how it's invested. Essentially, the investment would need to go into something that would generate additional tax revenue in order to get you to the second phase. So part of the conversation we had, and I think City Manager Conkle articulated it well, we would need to invest that first chunk well in order to get to the second chunk. And that second phase would be another $35 to $40 million. In the staff report here, I've indicated that, the original plan has $130.1 million of maximum indebtedness, which is essentially the spending limit. And the Urban Renewal Agency currently has about 103 left. So in today's dollars, depending on how quickly these projects get done, we're looking at maybe $85, $90 million. And over time, inflation is going to erode some of that purchasing power. But the 2-phase approach, phase 1 being what can we borrow today, lends it to getting approximately that $85 million overall. So clearly, there's some importance on the timing of the projects. If there's not enough tax-assessed value generated in that first phase, you will not have a second phase. So the second variable is the funding method. And we just described, currently the Urban Renewal Agency has no debt. There was two debts just recently paid off. And if we were to go today to borrow, we'd be borrowing about 35 to 40 million, and we'd be able to pay that back with our current revenue stream. The third variable is the external partner investment, and that's really where the money the investment ratio comes into effect. I know, again, Commissioner O'Donnell spoke last meeting about the ratio, say a 7-to-1 and 8-to-1 investment. And, if the urban renewal dollars are matched, 7 or 8-to-1, that generates a lot of tax increment revenue that can be used to generate future revenue. So the categories that we've described, public-private partnerships, publicly owned land and infrastructure, those first two categories are really where the direct private investment comes into play and multiplies the investment. Infrastructure definitely is a valid, investment for an urban renewal, but I consider that to be an indirect investment where the external partner dollars are not immediately there unless, you have an ongoing negotiation with somebody that's subsequently behind that infrastructure investment. So clearly the public-private partnerships and publicly owned usually have the direct external investment dollars. So on page 3 of my staff report, there is a list of the projects that we understood were still on the table. And again, this is not an exclusive list. I think on page 3 of my staff report, there was one that was added on page 2 and did not get on page 3, and that was the Riverwalk. But the table on page 3 essentially gives you what I think is a good discussion jumping off point as to the projects, the category, the urban renewal investment amount. And these dollars that are on this table, again, are the 2007 investment dollars in the plan, the original plan. And the private dollars invested here, for the most part, are educated, or they're actually from the original 2007 plan. So rather than wasting time necessarily doing a mathematical escalation of those, the 2007 plan is 15 years ago. New costs would essentially need to be, estimated on the private side. So really, what I see as a summary is two options for the Urban Renewal Commission essentially this evening is, one, to discuss, as James said, what are the projects that want to get on this final list? How much allocation of urban renewal dollars does the commission want to allocate? And then what priority? What would you want to essentially target in that first phase? And then what would you target in the second phase? So that's how I frame the discussion. Hopefully that means is meaningful to this commission. And I have Jacob has allowed me to display a spreadsheet of that table if that's helpful for the discussion, so that we can prioritize and make changes on the fly if you need. So that is my staff report. Thank you.
Now, if you recall, there was a great bit of discussion at the last Urban Renewal Commission meeting on the various projects, all of them, practically. And it was helpful. That discussion was helpful because it enabled us to focus on the projects that you'll see today and we'll have a discussion on today. So that was very helpful to prepare us for what we're about to discuss at this meeting. So with that said, we, as Matt had mentioned, we can provide these projects electronically, and then for you to have the opportunity to discuss what you prefer, which ones you prefer, and then categorize them or prioritize them, and then we can go forward from there.
Quick question, is the county shops property, is that the Kruger Lumber one?
No, it's on Aberdeen. Kruger Lumber's at 17.
Okay, where is the county shops? Is that one that we struck?
Yes, that's the one you struck.
Okay.
I thought that was on Abernathy.
Abernathy. Yeah.
Apparently it's in private ownership. The county shops are in the process of either completing the private ownership or it's in process.
Right.
Some land trading going on from what I understand. So why did we talk about leaving the Riverwalk off? don't recall that we made that prognostication.
No, you did not. I mean, we put it back on.
Okay.
Yeah, it's back on.
I mean, I'm hope springs eternal that it will happen in my lifetime. So I'm going to try to keep hope alive on that particular project.
Yes.
But it's considered to be a public
Yes.
property.
Well, it's kind of public-private because the entity is a private entity, so I would put it in a public-private category.
It's related, I guess. There was a commitment on the part of Metro Regional Government on that Riverwalk property. Is that still in place or not?
I didn't understand the question. I'm sorry.
On the Riverwalk, Metro made a commitment, I believe, of $20 million, and I'm wondering if that still exists.
Oh, I see. I have to get back with you on that question.
Okay.
I think, Commissioner O'Neely, that as far as I know, it's still on the table, but it could easily fall off the table.
I was wondering if it fell off the table already.
Not yet.
Okay.
It could be considered teetering, I guess, maybe you could say that.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Not quite sure where I'm going with this, so I get, when I'm looking at the list, I guess in my mind, it's very hard to make priorities of them just yet. One, because one of the biggest numbers on there is essentially been penciled in there for quite some time. We have no idea whether or not that number, and I'm referring to the Rossman landfill number, is even needed. And I will say that it probably will be needed and probably will be asked for, but to this point, it hasn't. And even in the last meetings where we were discussing on allowing the project at Rossman to go forward with the county and open the door for possibilities of grants, it still was not a question that they at the time were going to need urban renewal funds. And so we still don't know that. We haven't had really a dialogue with the developers specifically about that. I think we all know in our minds that ask is coming. We've always thought it, we always knew that. But unless we really know what that number is and what the need is of that development and what infrastructure needs that urban renewal in the city expect out of that project, it's really hard to make a priority when the majority of it is earmarked to that question mark, that giant question mark. And so I think that's, I want to have a conversation about it. I want to have in-depth conversations about that specific project because, and I think, Commissioner, sorry, I hope that's picking up. That mic was on, this one was not.
It's picking up something.
Okay, so if I need to, basically what I'm saying is, we've had this conversation, kind of what the needs are going to be from urban renewal, what the asks might be in the future for the Rossman landfill project. Commissioner O'Donnell on multiple occasions has questioned, whether our priority should be on that large parcel or should it be on some of the smaller parcels that we already own and all of that. To me, those projects all need to be talked with together. I look at all these conversations that we've had about what our goals are and what we want to see in our urban renewal properties. I think most of those have been listed out. One thing that I see kind of missing is, in terms of infrastructure, is transportation. And I don't mean just streets and sidewalks. I mean shuttle systems, and building a parking garage is not enough. If people park there, they still have to go somewhere from there. When people get off the train station, they still need to go somewhere from there. When they're at a hotel, how do they get between one bookend, as we've spoke about in the past, is we've kind of always referred to the Willamette Falls project as one bookend and Rossman as the other. How do we get people between those, and how do we have the infrastructure to do that? And it's not just parking, it's about shuttling, and it's about where people can park and how long they can park. And I don't want to get off in the weeds in that, but we've talked about that a little bit. To me, if I have a full understanding as an urban renewal commissioner about what the Rossman landfill project is, and do I have any idea what it is at this point? A little bit. But I don't have a real clear image of what that is. And I also don't think the developers at the Rossman landfill site have a clear understanding of what our needs are as a city and what our needs are as urban renewal. So I think that conversation really is crucial, because I think that will dictate what we want to do with our owned properties. The landscape property and the other properties that we own within sight of the Rossman landfill. If we know as an urban renewal agency that the Rossman landfill project is going to neglect certain needs that we have, then we know if we move forward with that project, then we have to make up for that on our properties, and vice versa. So I think it's really delicate how those all work together. It's complicated. I just know that if we commit to a huge price tag on one specific development, and it does not meet the needs that Oregon City needs in its infrastructure for tourism, and it only becomes shopping and it only becomes apartments, then we have ruined this city for a very long time. We really need to think about how that all mixes together, how it works, and how, if we really truly believe that Oregon City is going to be a tourism destination, that all that traffic comes in off the highway, parks somewhere in that lower part of the city or at the mill site, and gets there to all these other sites somehow without going through downtown and without going through or without affecting downtown drastically in the McLaughlin neighborhood. So I am not saying that I don't think, I'm not saying that I'm against the Rossman landfill being a priority. I think it is a priority. I just think we really need a far better understanding to know if it fits all the needs that we want and that we're on the same page so that all these other pieces work. And I have a hard time, really figuring out how to prioritize all the other ones without having a really pretty clear understanding of what our needs are and what the developer's needs is on that one project. I will say on some of these other projects, we also could have, I'm sure we're going to have more in-depth discussions on some of these other ones too. For instance, the end of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center, when I look at that, I'm probably looking at it with different eyes than other people. I'm assuming that, and I get that these numbers are penciled in as a starting place, so I'm not in any way acknowledging that those are solid. But when I look at end of the Oregon Trail and I see that $1 million number there, and then I compare that with other things, I'm thinking, that's not enough.
It's deferred maintenance.
And what I know is, myself knowing that building, that is just the cost of fixing the existing building, period. Okay? And to me, if we're going to do urban renewal projects, especially if we're going to do something major at Rossman, especially if we're going to do something major on our properties on Washington Street, then that $1 million price tag at the end of the Oregon Trail is going to be a lot bigger, because I don't think we want to just patch up the end of the Oregon Trail. If this is going to be the centerpiece of our community with this new development, and it's going to be essentially the front door to tourism, then we have to put some effort into rethinking the end of the Oregon Trail site and revisioning it in a way that's productive, in a way that makes money, because it's never made money. We can do that. We can look at the future of what that building is. And in fact, I think that's why this discussion with Rossman developers is so important. because I feel like there's some hints out there that there are going to be some tourism elements or some attractions as part of this possible Rosslyn landfill project. Well, guess what? If those attractions or tourism destinations somehow tie with what our wants are for the end of the Oregon Trail, whether it become an expanded exhibition space for a collection that needs a home, or whether it is an expanded convention center space. I mean, I could see us put some effort into a development that shares a partnership with an expansion at the end of the Oregon Trail that adds to some of these attractions, that includes convention space or hotel space or whatever, that then, you know, where we actually see some of these separate dollar items become under the same umbrella of a larger project. So I've said way too much probably, but I just don't want us to randomly throw out, well, these are our priorities, when we really haven't had that large conversation that I think we should start having. And maybe, but I don't want to derail the conversation of priorities either, but I do think we need to start narrowing down on some of the specifics of that major space and how we want to approach it and how we move forward as urban renewal agency in discussing these projects with these partners that are listed here. And then how do we juggle that when we're all in lawsuits for the next couple of years that's saying we cannot do one thing? I don't know how we get through it. I've warned about this, and now we're here, and I think we may be seeing everything that we were talking about the last couple of months being put off for another 5 years. I hope not, but
Hope not either.
it's very possible.
Somebody else wishes to speak?
Yeah, I agree with generally with what you're saying. I guess let me ask a couple of questions before I get into the nuts and bolts. So, Matt or James, could you remind me again how much money we received for the quiet zone, the federal funding that we received for that?
Yeah. It was, I believe it was $6 million. Oh, I'm sorry, $2 million.
I thought it was 2.5 or something like that.
I wish it was 6.
Darn it.
It's $2 million, and then $600,000 has to be raised privately.
By us, okay, so we've got, so I think there should be a little asterisk there, because I thought it was 2.5 is what we got, the allocation that we got. And then, of course, we still have the discussion coming about what we want to allocate the ARPA funding for, and I know that I've discussed this with the city manager, that we're gonna try to move that forward. So let me go back to, so that helps me, because we've got.
I'm going to interrupt you. What funding is that? I'm sorry.
ARPA funding, American Rescue Plan Act.
Yeah.
We have
Yes.
money that we received that we have not, it's going to be allocated to other things, but there's some reimbursement that we are already taking off the top that is going to pay us back for the work that we did to clean up the flooding and the ice storm and all of that, that's recouping costs for personnel. But then there's some additional money that has been set aside that we need to allocate. And I believe the city manager gave us kind of a very rough estimate. So one of the categories in there was the elevator. And we know that we desperately need additional security at the elevator, including cameras, a new gate system, and those sort of things. And ARPA money could pay for a majority of that funding. So it doesn't have to come out of it doesn't have to come out of Mr. Lewis's budget, but this will be added to Mr. Lewis's budget. So make sure that he's whole. So that's helpful. And maybe we should have an asterisk in this report that we did receive that federal allocation. And do you know if we actually have that in hand, it's in the bank, or was that just the nice check that we saw that Kurt gave us?
The first tranche of the ARPA money,
No, the money from for the quiet zone. Do we have that in hand? Is that in the bank?
I don't think we've received anything yet. Dana or John would know on that. I'm pretty certain we haven't received anything that.
Well, he's going to be leaving office at the end of the year, so we need to get that money. I know, right?
It is on the list, though, I think.
I know, it is. It's been funded from what I understand. So I know that many of you are aware, so if we look down the list, so we've got the downtown courthouse. And the reason that I want to elevate that discussion about that is that the county has finally voted to move forward with whatever they're calling their public-private partnership to build the new courthouse. So my big concern about that building is twofold. Number one, we should have been talking about this 2 years ago, but unfortunately, the county has kind of put us all off. So they want to talk now. So I know that Mr. Graham and Mr. Conkle are going to move that forward, and we're going to have some informal discussions about where we go with that. So that is, I'd say that is one of the key linchpins in our community. Number one, we cannot afford to have that property be vacant for any length of time. We also cannot afford to have it go by the way of Blue Heron, where it comes into private hands, somebody sits on it, doesn't do anything with it whatsoever. And so however I mean, I'm going to throw this out there, and I know this might be controversial, but one way or the other, there may be a way through the county. I know that they've indicated informally that they would pass it off to another local government. They would not sell it privately. There's some rules and regulations about how that's working. I don't totally understand that. But even if we own it or we get possession of it, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to be spending all the money to do the infrastructure or everything that's wrong with it. But at least we could have some control over it, and we could make a determination about how that gets redeveloped along with our community, plus look for a development entity that would work with us, and then we could spin it off. We had the opportunity to do that with Blue Heron, and unfortunately, we missed that opportunity, and I see this as another Blue Heron, where we should have control of that.
I've got a question on that, if I might.
Sure.
There's a building to the north of the plaza there. Is that
Yeah, the
also a
Holman
county
building where the
building?
jury, yes, it's the
So
Holman.
is that part of the?
Yes, that whole piece there, that property is all one tax lot. It includes the Holman building where the jury meets and the law library is. There's the Liberty Plaza, and then there's the courthouse. I have had some informal discussions with Chair Smith about looking at giving the plaza to the city so that it becomes a park. It is the only open space in that particular area that could be utilized and developed, and she is open to having those discussions. We've had very, very, very low level sort of discussions about the courthouse. I know that they're thinking about it. I know County Administrator Schmidt is thinking about it, but it's one of those opportunities where I think we're going to need to take a risk, because we know already that there isn't enough infrastructure up here to accommodate all those offices that people may want to move. There just isn't up here. We don't have the office infrastructure. We know that there's going to be somewhat of an exodus from downtown. I mean, I think we can anticipate it, but I think if we plan and we work with whatever entity and whatever community group, the group that we're talking about working with to look at what might be there, I think we have a big opportunity. And so I would have to say that the amount that's been suggested here, it's $5 million. That's not enough. And we can move money around. I mean, obviously we're playing with, not real money, but to me that is a critical project that even though it's publicly owned, it's like the pebble in the water. It is going to ripple out way beyond what we can even conceive. So control or some sort of agreement with the county that we get it. I mean, I think that's critical. Some of the other things on here, as we discussed earlier, I know that the question was on here that says, we need to do, a big project. I think I'm of the mind that we can do probably 2 or 3 things. And again, I'm looking at this as we don't have lawsuits, we don't have whatever, that we're thinking about this theoretically. There can be sort of a blending of things. I know we talked about starting with some of our publicly owned properties, and I understand those are small. I get that they're small, but sometimes you do a big one and a small one, or we do a combination thereof of something to help jumpstart this. And again, I'm thinking this theoretically. So that's kind of where my mind is going. I agree with you about the trail center. I'm hoping we might be able to allocate some ARPA money for that, because it's an asset that we own, and like all of our parks, we are in a deficit for maintenance. It's just, I know we got ourselves into this hole 25 years ago, and we are going to have to dig ourselves out of it. It's not going to necessarily generate a lot of increment, because it's publicly owned, but the ripple effect of it being, what's the word I want? Renovated and up to snuff is going to have a broader effect. I think, again, I agree with you, Rocky, that the Stimson property and the other adjacent properties to the trail center are key, and the discussion about what that is. I know that it's probably severely out of date, but we did back in the day adopt a Oregon Trail Master Plan, and I think it probably would behoove us to take a look
I
at
almost
that.
brought it tonight.
Huh?
I almost
I
brought
know,
it tonight.
I don't know
yeah.
where mine is. I think it's down in the basement, but I
Yeah.
have one as well. But there's probably parts of it that might still be valuable. There's other parts of it that are going to be sorely out of date. I jokingly said to Gail the other day that I don't know how it would happen, but I'd like a benefactor. I want those bonnets put back on that thing. It's
Yes.
just, I hate, anyway, sorry, I don't just want
Or
to say I
something.
hate. I just like the fact that they're naked hoops. So we've got that. Plus, again, the quiet zone, again, it's an infrastructure project, but I think in terms of the generic, what we have for historic downtown, I'm looking at that as not small projects like tenant improvements or storefront. What that project needs to be is a major seismic program to upgrade those upper stories so that we can get increment generated off of that. We want housing downtown. We can't have it unless those buildings are upgraded. And to me, that's what that money should be doing. Again, it will have definite ripple effects, and I know somebody out there would be willing to work with us on that if we can get enough money to make it worth their while, plus they put, whoever the private entity is, put their money in. I've always said that the Weinhardt building would make some awesome condos up on that third floor with maybe a mix of office in between. Maybe it's the courthouse, I don't know. So that's kind of where my thinking has been in thinking about this and sort of talking to City Manager Conkle, and so that's kind of where I'm coming from at this point.
Matt, you want to say something?
Sean? Matt.
Matthew.
It's close enough.
It's close. Is your
Call
middle,
him Chris. And
is
call
your
him
middle name
Matt.
Matthew?
Chris.
No, like I said at the last meeting, I think if I was to prioritize these things, it would probably be the quiet zone, then Rossman, then, I don't know. The Cove is, I mean, that's still there. And the rest of them, and then all the small ones around Rossman, you really can't do until you figure out what's going there.
Is the
So-
Cove one, is us doing a phase two on the development, or is that the public side where we wanted to have the park and the other?
It's around the Cove itself. It's a phase two.
Is that the development part of it, or is that the? Both.
It's a development
The
part.
park, okay. Because we talked about if we ever did that, we were going to definitely say, you will build the park, whoever the developer is, that we didn't get the first time.
Yeah, but I might suggest that, is there something that we can do where we can get all the projects, and then all 5 or 6 of us can just rank them and then give them to you, and so then we can kind of see which ones we think are priority from all of us, and it'd
We
be
talked about
a lot
doing that.
quicker.
I thought we were going to do that sort of informally.
But that way you get everybody's input, where we think's most important, you can weight them, and the ones with the lowest numbers are the most important ones.
You can certainly take that tactic. This is simply an opportunity to either list them at this moment in terms of the discussion, and then prioritize them. But you can take whatever tactic you feel would get you through this process, but it's important that we get in some type of
Yeah, okay.
product out of this.
Okay, yeah. So quiet zone, Rossman would be one of my higher priorities. The courthouse, not as high as Rossman, but pretty high, since it's going to move up here, and a lot of the attorneys will too. And so we'll need to do something with it, so. Then, like I said, all the small ones kind of fall on what the big ones do.
And your reasoning for, in your.
For the small ones, I wouldn't, yeah, because I wouldn't want to use the increment for the smaller ones until, I'd hate to do a project, some big project come in, and then it's the wrong project. That's why I think all the small ones, even around it, we really kind of need to wait.
Louder. I'm
I
missing you
said-
down here.
Okay, so, but the reasoning is I'd hate to spend a lot of money on a project, a small project, just because we own the property, we can get to it quickly. And then the big project comes in, and then the small project we built is the wrong one. And so now we just wasted opportunity or money or really just what it could have been. I mean, we'll have what it is, but it might still be the wrong thing if we go to one of the smaller ones and just do it before we know what some of the bigger ones are. Or we might use up the cash flow that we have available that we would like to use on a big project that now we can't use on a project for another couple of years. So there's a couple reasons.
I don't think it would be the wrong project. I think we're going to be very deliberate about what we do and what we want. I mean, that's why we have not taken any further solicitations on our property, because people are just throwing stuff at the wall, you know, how about you do this, how about you do that? Again, as Rocky stated, we have not really had that conversation. I think in our guts, we know what the community might need, and what we have to do is go out and find the person that can build that. Not the other way around. We're not waiting for somebody to come and we don't want to wait for somebody to come and save us. We need to go out and find out who that is, who can do that project and get it done. And I don't think it will be the wrong project, but I also don't want to put all my eggs in basket A over here, waiting and waiting and waiting, you know.
No, I wouldn't say, I don't think all
So
our eggs would fit
I'd like
in
to
one
see us
basket.
take two tacks, you know, moving two parallel tracks to get stuff done.
No, I agree. I just don't think we should do the smaller ones. And I don't like your analogy of all eggs in one basket. I mean, the biggest basket's $30 million.
Well,
We're
that's
talking
what that says.
$100 million.
I'm not putting in $30 million.
Can I say a few?
Yeah.
I agree with Commissioner Cross, and like the last retreat we had, I think he's articulated it really well. I would rather us do a bigger project and then, once that is complete, be able to better utilize the smaller properties so that it complements the bigger one rather than the other way around. And so that's one of my reasonings for why Rossman is my top one. And I would also agree with the quiet zone one, but looking in terms of fiscal sustainability and how we're going to actually be generating the TIF so that we can continue operating our urban renewal agency. Rossman is my number one. And again, I'm not opposed to the development on the smaller properties. Those definitely need to be a part of it. But when it comes to the centerpiece of what the future of this area looks like, it's definitely going to be centered around Rossman. It's not going to be something centered around one of those smaller properties. And we also just need to keep in mind that whatever we make as our first investment here, it needs to be something that will be generating TIF for us so that we can get to those smaller properties. And so I think starting small first, while I can understand and appreciate the logic behind, we need to prove to the community that we're doing this right and that we can right our past wrongs. I think that in terms of fiscal sustainability, I don't think that would be a great way for us to move forward.
Okay, I'm going to take a turn now. I basically agree with Sean's categorization. I wanted to come to the area there. When they did the jug handle project, it was to get traffic to Abernathy and get traffic to Washington Street, onto Washington Street. Any projects going to go in there, the road's going to have to be widened. It won't, if the big project comes through on the landfill, those roads are going to have to be widened. Also, if you go down there, if the interpretive center is really successful, that outdoor area is going to be used a lot. If you go down there, for example, in the concerts in the park, there are cars parked all over the place. Yeah. And one of the things we have to look at is parking down there. I think that would go probably to supplement in terms of the railway station and other things there. But I'm sure some of these infrastructural needs will be taken care of perhaps by the developer in terms of say, the landfill project if it comes through. But I think we're going to have needs in addition to it, and parking is already one of them.
We've got
Mr.
some
Chair.
major environmental issues down there, and so
I realize that.
I am very concerned about your comment about let's widen the road. We cannot destroy the work that's already been done down there. Now, you're not suggesting that, but we're very aware, we've been told many times, and I don't know if you've been down there lately, but I took a little stroll down there about a week ago when I was there early for concerts in the park, and there's more work that needs to be done. And with the watershed, I was talking to the fellow who's in charge of it, and he said, yep, that's something they've looked at for the, a phase 3 or 4 project. So I'm excited about
Which is
that. The area by the Metro's transfer station, there is
Which watershed person are you talking to?
the guy that has his off, the one we had here do the
Well,
presentation.
that's not our watershed.
Well, whatever the group is, they're at the Kruger House.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of his name at the moment,
Yeah.
sorry, it's escaping
Tom
me.
Gaskell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Clarification, Mr. Chair, did you prioritize, or I was just for clarification, did you prioritize projects, or was that a general discussion? I was just trying to follow where you were going with that.
I'm talking about things are going to have to be done. If that major project comes through with Brossman's, there are going to be traffic. I do not think those streets will be able to handle that area. I mean, they're designed, when you come off of
213?
yeah, when you come off of 313, there's an area there that has extra lanes, and then it narrows down. And I realize it's in the floodplain. I do not consider any of that major environmental areas, frankly. I think it's been degraded to such a point, any kind of investment to make it actually a suitable environmental area, I think would be, I think those monies can go elsewhere. But anyway, but also parking is going to be a major issue. And we own a lot of property there on that one side, on both sides actually. And the parking is going to be a major issue and something that we have to include.
With those, just once again, in terms of clarification, understanding that there has to be some infrastructure improvements.
Yes.
Are you saying Rossman is your, are you saying?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the requirements would be in terms of a development. Usually a development, when it comes in, and it's going to have a substantial effect on the, on other things, oftentimes there's expectations in terms of what happens, whether it's a subdivision coming in or anything else. But the point is, we own lands on both sides of Washington Street, and it seems to me those are the things one of the things that we can start thinking about, what needs to be done. No matter what the project is, at one point, I think that landfill is going to have something major happens to it. I'd like to see it during the existence of the urban renewal district, but right, if you talk about a truly blighted place, that's truly a blighted place.
Well, it depends on how you look at it, because again, let me go back to the end of the Oregon Trail Master Plan. That property was to be incorporated into the Oregon Trail Center and be expanded to give, is the word I want to use, Rocky, the experience of the whole trail, and it was going to be a major destination point. Now, I'm not saying that I support that or not, but we, as a city, adopted that. It's
Okay.
still on the books. It doesn't matter whether we've implemented it, but I'm just saying.
I know what kind of tax increment that creates.
I'm not getting to that. I'm just talking to you about history.
Yeah, I know.
We've complained so much that we have documents that are on the shelf that we've never really done. And so we need to make sure that we're not missing anything to make, I'm still waiting for the hotel that I thought was supposed to be breaking ground by now.
Like yesterday.
And again, if I hear one more person tell me, oh, it's supply chain, I'm going to run screaming from the room. I understand that that's an issue, but, it's like promises were made. And I'm glad you did bring up 922, because I'm about ready to say, I'm done. It's either do it or let's take it back, I've been saying, we've been talking about this forever, it seems to me like.
But we've been talking about everything forever.
Well, I know, but that one, let's either take the sign down that says sale pending. Somebody asked me about that the other day. They said, it's 5 years a long time for a sale to be pending. And I just sort of rolled my eyes because I said, well, I don't know where it is right now. And I saw Derek here and then he is still here. So it's like, come on, let's, are we getting it done or are we not getting it done?
Well, hotel would be nice for tourism.
You know, and that's what we need. And I know there's going to be small convention meeting space in that hotel. So I guess the next question is, where are we on the hotel? And the hotel is compatible with the end of the Oregon Trail Master Plan because we called out that site for a lodging.
So in terms of coalescing around an approach to this, are you agreeable with the idea of each of you prioritizing them and then submitting your prioritization? And if not, then if that's not the process you want to use, what would be the next step forward to list them or prioritize them?
I don't have any problem with us doing that as long as we have the ability to change our minds because the commission is going to have the last word anyway.
Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, so that was my exact point from the beginning, is ranking them does nothing more than what this throwing numbers at this page means. It means nothing. It means nothing until we know what these projects are. It means nothing until we know how realistic any of these projects are. For instance, the county courthouse could be project number 1 if I knew the county was willing to work with us and I knew that was possible. Also, Rossman landfill project could be number 1 on my list if it checked all the boxes that I, as an urban renewal commissioner, want and what I want to see with this town. If it's not, it's going to be 0 on that list. So we can throw rankings. The rankings mean nothing because we don't know enough about how realistic each of these projects are and whether or not we actually have the ability to make them happen.
But we could be sitting on this.
So I
think it's not a bad idea just to see whether we have any common ground. If nothing, I mean, it won't.
How do you have common ground on stuff with ranking we know nothing about? I mean,
well,
I
we know,
just mean that because
we know
I
enough
really
to be
believe
dangerous.
I could put Rossman as number 1 because I understand the impact that a large development could be. But if we say that's our number 1 and we realize we move forward on it and it gives us nothing of what we really wanted, which I would say the last project was kind of heading that way, and the Cove was heading that way. We all, it's the greatest thing. Cove is our number 1 project, and look, we failed miserably on it. So I don't want to say the biggest project is necessarily the best because we don't know that. It could be, and I hope it is, and it would make the biggest impact. But there's also something to say that if we had some smaller projects that were successful, we could have any success in this town of trying to convince the public that urban renewal is something to not fight over. And right now, like I said, we're fighting over it. So we have to really be deliberate about what these projects are. And I think just throwing random numbers on it is not going to get us anywhere. It's going to continue this diversive, which is happening just even right here when we don't even know these projects. This project's better than this one. We don't know that. We have no idea. And that's going to happen in the public. And these developers are going to go to the public and try to create it diverse of what they already have by having petitions and having, supporting one project or another. What we really need to do as an urban renewal commission is really have a dialogue with the people that are doing these projects, really give them an understanding of what we need as a city, what they want, and are we even close? If we're not, then we move on to the next project, and that's gonna tell us what our priorities are. I mean, if a developer says we're gonna build all apartments in a shopping center at Rossman, we're gonna say, well, what are you gonna do for the infrastructure of tourism? Well, nothing. Well, then guess what? That goes to a 0 on my list. If that developer says, hey, we're going to do mixed use and we're going to do this and this is how it benefits downtown, and this is what happens if someone parks their car at the Rossman landfill and goes to a nice restaurant and has dinner, they can leave their car down there and they can go into Main Street on a shuttle and support that. Or is it just apartments? I don't know that. I think that's the same way for this courthouse project. If I knew that the county commission was saying, you know, we would work with urban renewal, and we would maybe consider giving the city Liberty Plaza, and we would work with urban renewal to talk about selling that building, and we maybe have some people lined up for it. Oh my gosh, that would ramp that up to the top project. Any of these things can have these variables. And so I would prefer, you know, kind of picking the list that, you know, maybe saying, maybe it's not a 1 through 7 list. Maybe it's, okay, we all agree for the most part, the best 5 projects right here to focus on are these, and we work with those, and we get the information that we need enough to get a fine-tuned idea of what that really is going to be.
I don't have a
Because
problem with that.
then we can actually, as a commission, say, wow, we have a pretty good understanding of it, because I don't think, minus that, I don't think we're going to get the community on board. Remember, every lawsuit that happens derails this. If we can settle that original question that has started every single lawsuit, which is, are the citizens going to have a right to vote on these various things? How are we going to counter, how are we going to respond to that vote that said, do not spend a dime? We have to be able to say, look this is an amazing project. We've talked to the developers. We know that this is what the city's getting out of it. This is what they're getting out of it. And work together to push it forward. And then it's going to resolve those fights against us. If we don't do that,
Well, then let's do
we're
what
never
you
going
said.
to get
Let's
anywhere. We're never going to get anywhere.
Let's get the list of possibly the top 5. Then we can hone it down and have a discussion. I think the list right now is too big.
I do too, yeah.
To talk about all of them. I mean,
Right.
I'm okay with us doing that. Then we can concentrate on having that discussion about what it is we want. I mean, I have a pretty good idea of kind of the things that you want. I think some of the things that you've talked to me about are some of the things that I want to see, but we need to get consensus from this commission if that is what we all think.
Sure.
And then once we know that, that makes it easier for us to talk to the public about, here's the vision. We've heard what you
Right.
said. Like you said, if it's another shopping center, I mean, let's face it, do we need another shopping center in this region? No, I don't think so. I mean, that is just based on the analysis that I've looked at from experts in Florida about what's happening with shopping centers. I don't think so. I mean, I would, when I worked for the city, I would love to see the Oregon City Shopping Center be redeveloped. It has got so much potential to be so much more. It could be a mixed-use development, that tons of vacant parking. I mean, it could be something really spectacular, but we don't have any buy-in from whatever the faceless, nameless entity that owns it, because it's not a person anymore. It's actually some big giant REIT of some sort. But anyway, it's stuff like that. So I think we should do, do we have consensus that we would like to talk about 5 projects to hone this thing down?
Sure, I think if you rank them, you'll know what the top 5 are.
I think we don't rank them, we just say, what are the top,
Yeah,
just list
how you
them.
rank
Don't put 1, 2, 3, or 5, just say,
don't make
here's
sense to me.
here's my list of 5, and then we go there.
Well, I think that you have 2 commissioners so far that have expressed clearly what their projects are.
I would love to have them explain exact detail of why they think those individual projects are so good, because they must know some amazing amount of detail on those projects that we don't, to be able to rank them. I mean, that's what I think. I mean, just because it has a big price tag, and just because someone's telling you this is what they're building, you really think that that's enough to rank them?
Well, I will
Based on
say,
the fact that I've been on this urban renewal commission for so long, and seen so many projects that we've told are going to be done this way, and they've all become something else. I do not buy that. So you can rank them all you want. It's not going to get us anywhere, and it's not going to get us over that hurdle that the voters are stopping us from doing. So
As I recall, you
You'll
were
be in
on
the same
you were
place
on the
10 years from
minority
now.
end of the amendments for the Cove.
what?
You were a minority vote on those amendments for the Cove, where it just kept taking the stuff out that we said we were going to get.
Oh, yeah, and every other project we've done that has changed 10 times in this commission is allowed to give one more chance and one more
Yeah,
chance.
that's what I said.
As in the latest ones we asked about tonight.
Yeah, I'm done. It's time to fish or cut bait.
Would you go through your list again one more time?
the 5, I can give the 5.
Could I, just real quick?
Let Adam say something there.
Well, the reason why I was comfortable putting Rossman as my number one, and you were mentioning if there was information there that we may have that the rest of the commission doesn't have, well, I've taken the time to sit
That
down
was
with them.
sarcasm.
I've taken the time to sit down with them and to listen to them and ask my own in-depth questions of them. I've watched the presentations given at the OCBA. I've followed this closely. And so I know that the developers have tried reaching out to the commissioners, and I know we all have various degrees of comfortability doing those what do you call them, the sidebar meetings. I know we have various levels of comfortability doing that. But I will say on my end, there is a knowledge there because I have taken the time to sit down with them. And I think that this had, and it is not a perfect project, but I think it has the potential where if we were to have that open dialogue, which we have not yet had, it could become that. And I think all of us really want to have a unified, unanimous decision on as to where we want to spend this money, because there's just been so much division on this topic in the last few years. And so if the rest of us aren't going to meet with them privately, which I understand and respect the decision not to, I would suggest that we have another opportunity for them to come speak with us. I know there's been a disconnect these last few times we tried to do that because we didn't schedule enough time, we didn't
No,
clarify
because the
exactly.
agenda was not what we expected it was going to be once the meeting came.
Yes, we did not clarify
It
with
was
them.
a totally different agenda.
They did not clarify with us what they wanted. We did not clarify with them what we wanted. And so we didn't have the correct amount of time to discuss things and ask in-depth questions. So what I would suggest is that I'm fine doing the 1 through 5. Like I said, Rossman is my number one, and I feel like I'm able to make that decision because I have looked at the details. I'm fine with doing that ranking, but I would suggest to what Commissioner Smith has said about not having all the information he believes he needs, to schedule another time with ample amount of time for us to have a dialogue, to ask questions with the developers so that we can say what it is we want from that property, for them to say this is what we envision right now and here's how we're willing to work with you guys. Because I don't know where the disconnect has been, because I've heard that they have been in contact with staff, but we haven't been in contact with them, again, for understandable reasons, because we need to keep a measured distance from this. But I think now is the time when we're having this conversation about ranking, that we can actually be in dialogue with them and talk about what we want from this property and how we can finally, once again, do something with urban renewal and clean up that dump.
Okay, I don't want us to rank them 1 through 5. Just take 5 projects that you think are important. So I don't care what, we don't need to know which one is number
exactly
1.
right.
Just your top 5. Just say, we can either say what they are, we can write it down, whatever, but don't go 1 through 5 because it's going to change. It's going to be kind of like, okay, this one's up, this one's down. So you gave 3. No. I guess, I'll just jump in. I will say that if I was to pick 5, what's important to me is the quiet zone, obviously, because that leads to other things. The courthouse, probably the Clackamat Cove. I kind of throw Clackamat Cove and the Stimson property kind of in the same category, and then I would probably say the landfill. So that's 5, but I'm not going to rank them which one I think is priority because I agree with Rocky. I don't have enough information, and I was one of the people, I'm not having sidebar meetings about this. I've been very clear, and Mr. Henderson understands what my discomfort was, and if we're going to have a discussion with them, I don't want to spend a half an hour hearing about all the qualifications of the consultants, because that's not what's critical to me, and I don't want to hear about how people are from Oregon City when they're not. What I want to hear about is what are the basic components of the project and, what they envision it's going to be, and then we can continue with the conversation that Mr. Smith is talking about what we think it should be, what we've heard from our constituents, or what we think. That's a very tight, very specific discussion. And we ended up having a lot of extraneous time when we were talking about the brownfield grant. We never got to the brownfield grant because there was all this other stuff. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
So, Mr. Chair, we've heard from from Commissioner McGriff, she gave us 5. We've heard from Adam Morrow, he gave, I only got 3 out of that.
I only had 3.
I didn't hear the other 2. Can you just state what your 5 are, if that's your preference?
Okay, I would say Rossman Landfill, Clackamas Cove, Courthouse, and I don't know, are we talking about just the phase 1 part? Because I know we were talking about 2 different phases, one with the initial investments, and then 2, one that might be more focused on infrastructure.
Go ahead, Matt.
Well, I mean, you can assume that you can borrow, 35 to 40 million with existing revenue stream right now. Just, it might even be more manageable for the commission to consider, ignore the second phase. When you'll know whether or not you're going to have a phase 2, depending on what you do with phase 1.
Exactly.
So,
I'm hopeful.
yeah.
So go with your phase 1.
Okay, so phase 1, Rossman, Clackamas Cove, Courthouse, EOT, and Quiet Zone. Quiet Zone maybe depending on what discussions look like for the ARPA funding and if we were to get that fully funded with our matching through ARPA.
The one thing I don't want us to take off the table totally is that I pray for a miracle on the Riverwalk. It could happen, I know. I'm taking a big leap, but we cannot discount that. Because again, Rocky, as you said, that's the other bookend. It might happen.
Commissioner Cross, I think I heard 2.
I gave you 3.
He had
That's it.
3.
You gave me 3. Do
I do the landfill, the cove, the courthouse, and the quiet zone. I don't have a 5th.
You don't have a 5th? Okay.
Oh, good, because I have 6.
Okay. I give mine to
We
Rocky.
gotta throw the Riverwalk in there somewhere as a
No,
backup.
I didn't throw that in there.
Yeah. I'm
Commissioner
throwing the Riverwalk
Commissioner
in.
Smith, what are yours?
And so, well, again, I wish I was 7.
You can have.
I actually want to put End of the Oregon Trail and Rossman together. I don't think those are separate things.
I think.
So I put them together. So I'll say my 5 are End of the Oregon Trail / Rossman, Stimson property, Courthouse, Cove, and Quiet Zone. Even though I'm sick of talking about the Cove.
Okay.
But something has to happen there.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go with those 5, but when I'm talking about the interpretive center, I'm going to include the park itself. Because there's a lot of activities that go there. So my point is there's more to it than the interpretive center.
Oh, I agree, absolutely.
So those 5 as well.
So, I need to clarify, so your 5 are?
It's the same as everybody said, almost everybody, Cove, Rossman, Courthouse, interpretive center park area, including the park itself, and the quiet zone.
Okay. I think that's everybody, right?
Yep.
So that's more or less unanimous, even though it's in parts of that.
There's some wiggles
We
there,
have
but I
wiggle
mean,
room.
it's,
And put the Riverwalk in as a question mark. I mean, again, we have to let our partners know down at the mill that we are still committed to that. We don't want to leave it off, but we're going to do a placeholder for it. How about that?
Well, I understand your position, but the others have to agree with you.
I'm just saying, we want to make sure that our partners at the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde know that we are still keeping it on some list somewhere.
Yeah, I recommend that we list it then as an item, a 6th item, and so
With the
there's no
question,
ambiguity.
with the question mark, yeah.
Yes, no ambiguity.
All right. So this was a big step, just in terms of the 5 discussion pieces. So
We're coming back to talk about them, though.
I'm fearful to go any further.
Why don't we stop while we're ahead?
yeah, maybe that's.
Mr. Chair, it's up to you. Would you like to, the next step would be to prioritize them, but I don't think that'll be, I think that'll be another session altogether. So it's probably best to stop here.
Could could we please schedule a time when we could hear from Summit so that we can then have the information to do the 1 through 5 rankings of those top
Right,
5?
exactly. You need to hear from,
I don't want to make, I don't want it to be exclusively that, because we need to talk about the other projects as well. We need to talk about the other items on the list, about what that might mean. They're equally important.
Well,
But the Rossman landfill one is the only public-private partnership one that we
courthouse.
would be discussing.
The courthouse is going to probably need to be a public-private partnership. It's mislabeled on here.
So, okay, but what I'm saying is from looking at the categories here, from the 5 that we had prioritized, the Rossman landfill is the only one right now that is labeled as public-private partnership, whereas the rest of them, we can just have a discussion amongst ourselves.
yeah, I agree with Andy, actually. It's actually gone through the planning commission, has it not?
yes.
So there are specific things that we could be introduced to into that process.
Also-
So I think we should have a meeting specifically dealing with that. I agree with you.
I'd like to recommend that we change the courthouse to public-private, because that's what it's going to take. It's not going to be all public.
Okay, do everybody else agree with this? That's a suggestion.
Yes. Yeah, I think any of them that have private dollars are
okay.
kind of,
There's a distinction between public-private partnership and publicly owned. We recognize that publicly owned, we will have to turn into privately owned in order to generate TIF.
Yes, he says owned, and they're just looking at it as public, and I'm looking at it as a public-private partnership. So that's really the only way that it's going to happen.
Yeah, you're looking at it the next step over.
Right.
But in terms of its current situation, it's owned by a public entity. I think that's just the
An
difference.
entity, yes.
So it's a public, yes, sir.
But again, I would like to have a discussion about all of them, not exclusively, that we could allocate so much time for the Rossman, and then we have maybe one other project, because to me, they are not as interdependent as you guys think they are. To me, I want to get a clear picture in my mind about what we think, what do we think about that? The other things.
Now, keep in mind now that these other projects don't have the other projects, you don't have identified developers, or you don't have identified individuals that are
We're
there.
not there yet.
They're not there yet. So therefore, there's a hole there. That you do have, obviously, for Rossman, you do have a potential partner in the county. The end of the Oregon Trail, that's a long, so there's a hole.
We own
there.
it.
I mean, you don't have partners with the others, so therefore, to discuss what's next is kind of difficult unless people step forward and say, we want to do this.
Yeah, see, I kind of disagree with you. I don't think we need to have somebody, that's where, again, we go out and we can find the somebody. We define what we think we want to have done with that particular piece of property, which we own, based on what we've already done, expanding on future, and go for it. Again, we need to be the suitor, we need to be the person out there looking.
I don't think there's a disagreement with
Yeah.
that. I think the disagreement is just that we're further in the process, at least in terms of actually having an identified developer,
Yeah, they don't
that we
own
could
it.
actually, yes, an identified developer, where we could have that conversation and have them come to us and give their vision to us. So that's why it's different. We don't disagree that we should also be pursuing other things. None of us have, this group has not put Rossman as number one at this moment in time. So it's just what makes the most sense, given where we are.
Yeah, I mean, the same argument that she's putting forward there applies to the Cove too. There may be
Exactly.
only a private
Yeah, we're
partner
gonna
in
have
that
to,
too.
yeah,
So I think
that is a
you're right.
public-private one as well.
I think we should have the developer of the Cove and have a discussion with them and raising your concerns or desires as to what you think should be in there.
We don't have a developer for the Cove.
I didn't mean the Cove. I meant.
Yeah, I thought you meant Rossman.
I
Yeah,
meant
yeah,
I
you said
that was
Cove.
wrong.
That's okay.
Yeah, no, I meant the landfill.
So gentlemen, we have another meeting after this, so.
Yeah, you do. So is there a consensus generally to have the Rossman the developers come, well, the individuals that want to develop the Rossman project to come forward and give a presentation?
No.
Is that your,
No.
that's one?
No,
What
no
about-
more presentations.
That's one.
So this is what I really want is the Because Adam, I have seen all the presentations, and it's still not enough for me to rank it. I've been lobbied from so many people about this amazing development. I know what the development plan is. That's not enough. What I want to see, and what I think we really need to have, is a dialogue.
And that's what I had when I sat down with them.
That, so I don't want a presentation. I would really want a 2-hour work session or more where we can just ask questions. Questions like, how does your development plan to tie in with the end of the Oregon Trail? How does your development tie in with the train station? How have you designed it in a way that is conducive to tourism? None of those questions have been answered in any presentation. Those are the kind of questions that we, I think, as Urban Renewal need to really understand. Because it could lead to a public-private partnership with an expansion of the interpretive center. It could lead to a public-private partnership with the Stimson probably. It could lead to a bunch of other things. If we know that the focus of the future of Oregon City is tourism, and we know that all of that infrastructure is primarily going to be lower on the bottom of the hill, then we have to understand how that all works. And if the developers can't really answer that question to me in a real direct way, then I will have a huge question mark about whether it's a good expense to put $30 million into the last land that we have left to fulfill that infrastructure for the entire city's tourism programs. That's the kind of discussion that I think we should have, because I think if we want public buy-in for an amazing development down there, it has to meet the potential dreams that we have all been thinking about this city is going to become in the next 20 years. And to me, that's not apartments, and it might be some, but we saw that with the Cove. We now have an apartment complex and nothing else.
Yeah, it's out there in the wilderness by itself. Yeah, I think I can agree with you. That's why I said I don't want the fancy schmancy presentation. Been there, done that.
Yeah.
So I just want to know, is there a general consensus with having, first of all, there's a general consensus for the developers who want to do the Rossman project to come forward and engage in a discussion?
Yes.
Is that a consensus?
Yes, not a presentation, and I'm not doing it for 2 hours, I can tell you that. I think we can lay out questions. If we really want to be responsive, we can lay out some questions ahead of time so they have a chance to think about them, if we have them. I think that'd be the responsible thing to do, even if it's just 2 questions. Those 2 questions, as you've already indicated, Rocky, lead to 5 other questions.
Sure, yeah.
So
I don't care if it's a presentation or a dialogue or a mix of the two, but when I was not referencing watching just the presentations as to why I feel more confident about it, it is because I met with them and I asked them specific questions. And so there's a lot more that we were able to go through and parse out in that environment. And so being able to have that with the 5 of us, I guess, now, would be really helpful. And I think any mix of presentation, dialogue, whatever works, because we all have varying levels of knowledge about this project. So at least having a baseline as to what it is, I think would be helpful.
yeah. What's the vision?
So it sounds as if we have a consensus, Mr. Chair. So if that's correct and everyone agrees, let's proceed in that way and schedule a meeting for that purpose.
Agree to it.
Okay.
That's a consensus of the group.
I move we adjourn.
I second it. I don't know if I can just adjourn it.
Okay, let's take a